Welcome back to Easily Explained, where today we will be talking about slopes of lines. So let's get started. In our video about different ways to represent data, we did go over slope and how to write equations, but we're going to be focusing more in depth on slope in this video, rise over run, and all of that, how it correlates to the slope and how to find the slope of a line or the slope of 2 points, and then we'll move on into more complicated concepts. So first of all, what do slopes of lines represent? They represent the rate of change of the data. Let's go deeper into that. What is the rate of change of the data? The rate of change is figured out by asking how quickly or at what constant rate is the data changing. Let's look at an example situation. Our example situation, Sam drives 40 miles per hour for 5 hours. This is our situation. Now we want to see the slope and what it represents. So, if the slope represents how quickly or at what constant rate the data is changing, that means that the slope in this case represents how many miles per hour he's going. Because that, if we were to graph, every hour it would increase by 40 more miles. The first hour he would go 40, the second 80, and so on and so forth. So our rate of change is 40 miles per hour. We usually use m as the variable for slope. So in this case, m is equal to 40 because each hour that Sam drives, the data, basically how many miles he drives, is increasing by 40 miles. Now let's graph this situation. Let's say that a graph like this is given to represent our current situation. We have time in hours on the x-axis because it is the independent variable, and we have the distance in miles on the y-axis, and we've plotted it so that it's accurate for each mile for 5 hours. So I labeled every point A, B, C, D, E, and F. And I also made this, you can think of it as almost a staircase. The orange line represents the vertical change and the green line represents the horizontal change. And this is what we're going to use to help us find the slope and look at some different ways to interpret the slope. The first thing we're going to do is calculate our vertical change, or our rise, the orange value. What is this value? Well, we know that this point here is 40 because at 1 hour he's going to travel 40 miles. So we know that this point right here is 40. So that means the distance from 0 to 40 is 40. So our vertical change is 40. Now we're going to calculate our horizontal change, or our run. What is this value? That's pretty easy. It's already given, 0 to 1, so this is 1. Now remember that slope is rise over run, and we've already found our rise and our run values, so we can just substitute. And there it is. our slope. So that was the slope when we calculated it from point A to point B. But let's say we wanted to use two separate points. Or let's say that some points weren't given to us. Say we were only given A and D. Would we still get 40 as our slope? How would that work? Because obviously this entire vertical change is much more than this. Well, let's test it out. Let's see how it works. So now we're looking at this big triangle rather than our smaller triangles. Let's see if this works. We're going to start with our vertical change. We have 50, 100, and point D is at 120. So 100 and then 100, and then this is 20. So our complete vertical change is 120. Now let's do our horizontal change. We have 1, 2, 3. So now we can find the slope. Rise over run. Now you might think this is obviously different, but you actually cannot determine that until you simplify. And if you simplify 120 divided by 3, you'll actually see this is 40 miles. So, no matter which 2 points you take on the line, it'll always simplify to your correct slope, the same slope that we found when B was right here, and C, D, E, and F. If we were to take A and F, we would still get the same thing after simplifying it down, and we would still get 40 miles because it's a constant rate of change. So no matter what 2 points you take, you're always going to get the same slope. And now it's time for you to practice. So for the 2 different graphs below, find the slope of the line after finding the horizontal and vertical change. So just like we did before, choose any 2 points that are given and then find the horizontal change, the vertical change, and remember that the slope is the vertical change or the rise over horizontal change or the run. Pause the video now and start the practice. Alright, let's start with number 1. The first thing I want to do is choose 2 points. So I'm going to choose 0, 0 because it's easy, and I'll choose this last point over here. And now I'm going to draw my horizontal to vertical change. Alright, so I am starting at the very end and I'm moving to the 0, 0 point. So I'm starting at the 4, -4 point and I'm going to 0, 0. First, let's calculate the rise. We have 2 up, another 2, 4. And if you're just looking at this, remember distance up is not negative. So make sure you remember to switch the sign. Otherwise, just manually look at it and see it's going 4, but up. So when we talk about vertical change, it is going to be 4. And now for the horizontal change. We have 2, 2, but it is going left because we're going from this point to this point. So that means this is actually -4. So our slope is vertical change 4 over horizontal change -4. But remember, we can still simplify this down because we didn't take the next available point. We took another point. So if we were to simplify this, it just becomes 1 over -1, which is just -1. Now let's move on to number 2. In number 2, even though there are points where each interval intersects the y point, they're not exact. And if we're given a situation like we were given here where the points were not exactly, they were not exactly on 100 or 50, it was easier because we could just calculate it using the situation with a table or just doing mental math. But since we're not given any situation, we want the closest answer, and that means we're going to use this point because it is exact. 0, 0 and 2, 3. So in this case, if we were to extend the line, we might find another point, but just by what we're given, those are the 2 points we want to use since they're going to give us the most accurate and easiest to calculate answer. All right, let's start with our vertical change. 1, 2, 3. All right. Now for horizontal change. 1, 2. So our slope is 3 over 2. And since this can't be simplified any further unless we just want to change it into a decimal, which we could, or we could just leave it as a fraction. Usually when we just have a graph and we're just told to write the slope, it's not an equation or anything like that. We usually just leave it as a fraction. So 3 over 2 is fine. Congratulations, you are now an expert at slopes of lines. If this video helped, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye!